the San Juan Island Virtual Library, and I'm going to tell you right off the bat that we're recording this. So if you're uncomfortable about that, go ahead and leave. But and I will tell you that because if you have your video on, we can see what you're doing. So just be conscious of that. And if you don't want people to see what you're doing, go ahead and just turn off the video. After a while, I'll ask you to mute yourselves and I'll be giving the presentation, and then we're going to be doing the Q&A afterwards. I recommend, in terms of the format, that you kind of hover over your screen at the bottom, and you'll see several kind of like a menu down there. And you'll see participants in particular. There are 16 of you there right now. If you click on that, it will actually give the list of participants on the right-hand side of your screen. And you'll be able to mute and unmute yourself by hovering over your thing. And you will also, there's a thing that says more on it. And if you go to more, you can actually do a virtual raising your hand. So that's a good way during the Q&A. If you want to get my attention to asking a question, please do so and do it that way. I'm gonna, after a while, I will actually share my screen and giving you a PowerPoint. So that's the only thing, hopefully that's the only thing you're going to be seeing. If you don't want to be distracted by the other participants, if you just want to see me talking, then go to the upper right of your screen and you'll see speaker view, and click on that, and it will just show the little window with me and then the actual presentation itself. There is, I think there is a chat box. Well, maybe there's not a chat box on this. We'll just go ahead and raise hands for doing this. And what else? You can exit at any time in the lower right-hand side. Again, if you hover over the thing, you'll see end or exit, and that's the way you can get out of there. So I usually, when we have these programs at the library, I usually go through all these various things about you know, where the exits are, where the bathrooms are, and things like that. I'm going to assume that you all know where those are right now. But I do want to give a shout out to the Friends of the Library, who are just very supportive of the San Juan Island Library program. So, and they've done this great job of putting out these free books out there in front of the library. So those of you on San Juan Island, if you're still looking for a book, go by and pick up a free one at the bin there. We're going to have some more programs in July, including one on Know Your Islanders called Life on Mars, and then what's turned out to be a pretty popular series, the Nature Matters series, which is in conjunction with the Park Service. And on July 8th, they're going to be giving one on Salmon Bank. It's Ranger Jeff does these, and they're very informative. And I recommend that you sign up for that. At the end of the thing, I have actually have a sheet of the various links to the resources that I'm going to be talking about, and I'm happy to send that to you if you just shoot me an email in the same way, to the same address that you asked for the invitation, and I'll go ahead and send you one of those. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and go to the program. Okay. So this is a beginner surfer's guide to the internet genealogy, and I'm going to be talking about various sources for that. But I wanted to start out with some of my family history, And, and in particular, my godfather, who was David Kahanamoku. Now, most of you may have heard of a Kahanamoku that was Duke Kahanamoku, and he's the second from the left in the photo in the lower right. And he was really famous. He won several gold medals at the, and I believe it's the 1936 Olympics. He was a great surfer and has really become kind of an icon for representing surfing in the United States. But his brother David, who's kind of he's taller than Duke there, and he was my godfather. And part of the reason is that he had a really great relationship with my parents, and in particular my mother. And he was a lot older than she was, and he taught her how to board surf. And the way I told you, this is surfing, okay? So the way surfing happened, and you taught it, is he would take out these big boards, and they had huge boards. You can see there that those are very large boards, and they were made out of koa. And he would paddle out with her, and at first he would stick her on his shoulders, and he would surf in that way. And then when she got used to that, he would go out, catch a wave, and he would put her in front of him, and she would surf that way, and he would hold her, and she would surf that way. And eventually he would paddle out with her and then get her alone on the board and go ahead and surf. So it's a great thing. And so she developed this great relation, and ultimately he became my godfather. Now, what's interesting about David is that, you know, I just in preparing this thing, I just happened to look on ancestry.com, and I found this full family history of him here. And so and furthermore, I searched the internet and I came up with all these pictures of him, including this lower left-hand one, which I assume was a passport photo. So there's a lot you can get on the internet just kind of randomly. Now, I'm going to tell you this just odd story about him. In 1933, the Field Museum in Chicago hired the sculptor named Malvina Hoffman, and she was hired to make sculptures of what they considered to be typical races. And this was for an exhibit, believe it or not, in 1933, called The Races of Mankind. Well, David was tapped to be the Hawaiian, and the way she did it is she would take a full body cast of her model and put plaster all around them, and only had 2 straws sticking up their nostrils so that they could breathe. And they had to stand there for several hours while the cast set. And then she would break it, and she would then mold a sculpture from the person, and then she would manipulate it to emphasize what she thought was the typical features of these various races. So it's just it's a very kind of bizarre notion in a certain sense. I find it interesting that I have a personal connection to this. And actually the Field Museum currently has an exhibit, which is kind of a relook at this whole project, at this whole exhibit, and looking to why they did it, and kind of reinterpretation of it. Okay, I'm going to be talking about several resources here that are mainly available through the internet. I'll be talking about Heritage Quest, Ancestry.com, both of which are available through the San Juan Island Library site, grave sites, GenWeb, Washington Rural Heritage, and then I'm going to kind of go into some little odd avenues in terms of supplementing research, in particular for either local, regional, or state history resources in terms of genealogy. And I'll go through those one by one. And then I'm going to actually talk about you know, give you a full example of how I did it for one person. So if you go to the library website and go to the home page, it'll look something like this, and you actually go to that middle thing that says online resources, and you click on that, and you will come to this, and it gives various online resources. If you want engine repair, go ahead and go to that, but we're talking about genealogy. So you click on genealogy down here, and it will show something like this. So we have basically 3 different resources that way. There's Heritage Quest online, which I will talk about briefly. There's the library edition of Ancestry.com, and then there's the San Juan Island Heritage. Okay, so the 800-pound gorilla of online genealogy searching, internet searching, is Ancestry.com. But there is another one called Heritage Quest, and this is kind of a comparison of the 2 programs. I will tell you that I believe that Ancestry bought up Heritage Quest, so it's kind of a moot point at this point. But they do have different formats, and it's good to know the difference. So it's like it says, the Heritage Quest is strongly focused on American resources, although they have some from Canada and the UK. They have a fewer amount of databases as opposed to Ancestry's, and but it is a complementary resource that way. So if you click on the Heritage Quest actual icon, you come up with this first of all. And so it talks, the first thing it shows is US Census records, so that you can go into those directly and search for your ancestors or whoever you're trying to research. But there are these other resources available too. So you can, as I said, go into the census research. You can search various local books that deal with various families. You can search cemeteries, particularly through Find a Grave, which I'll go into later, city directories, military records, or immigration records. And wait, there are more. There are public records, Social Security, death indexes, all sorts of stuff, and in particular, a photo collection. And then you can actually do it by particular media, so maps and photos. And then also in the lower part there, you can see, you can search it by location. So it's what I'll be talking about Ancestry as doing kind of a initial global search for particular people. But if you want to go into a particular record, this is a good way to do it. And I recommend that you go to Heritage Quest to do that. That again is under genealogy on the library website. It's free if you're a library patron. And I don't even think you have to be a library patron to be able to do it. So it's a great thing. Okay, we're going to move on to Ancestry.com, and it's really great because ProQuest has basically offered remote access for free for this. So all you have to do is be a library patron and log in with your library card. During this time of COVID-19, all the libraries, and by all I'm saying Orca, San Juan, and Lopez, have a reciprocity. So if you are, for instance, on Orcas and you want to use the San Juan Island Library, you want to use the Ancestry.com thing here in San Juan, you can just get a card number through our library and go ahead and use it to log in. When you come to Ancestry.com, this is the home page. And I will warn you that I have a subscription that kind of goes beyond the library edition. And so you're seeing all sorts of stuff like Muriel Howard Cook family tree. That's my mother's family. You'll see the thing, all these hints over here and my name over here and all that sort of stuff. But you will come up with something very similar to this. And in the menu here, that's the home page, and they have trees and search. And we're gonna click on search, and this is what you will see first off. And again, I'm doing this as a beginning surfer's guide to internet genealogy. I'm sorry for if I know many of you are far more experienced than I am with this, so please bear with me. But this is the basic way you do it. So under a search thing, you have the first and middle names right here, last name, and then place your ancestor might have lived. And if I'm doing local stuff, I generally do a generic thing, San Juan County. That's the best way to do it. If you know they're on a particular island, San Juan, Lopez, Orcas, Waldron, go ahead and put that in. Those will show in the actual menu there when you start typing it out. And if you know anything about this person, okay, when did they die? When were they born? You know, where did they marry? Do you know the name of their sibling or father or mother or anything like that? The more you can put into this search, the better that it'll narrow it down a whole bunch. When I do the search thing itself, it'll have this drop down menu here. And I always go for all collections because I want to know everything that's out there. But if you have a more specific purpose, such as census or birth and marriage and death or so on and so forth, go ahead and do it that way. You can see kind of hovering in the background a sample that I did here, and I decided to take Joe Friday. So there's Joseph Friday, and the place your ancestor lived, I put San Juan County, comma, Washington. So, and then I click on search, and here's what I come up with. So on the upper left-hand side, it kind of shows you the parameters of what the search I did. And then I came up with these hits. So apparently there's an 1880 United States Census information for him. And there are 3 records of naturalizations that come up right away. So I went ahead and clicked on the 1880 United Federal Census, and I came up with Joseph Friday, age 29, born around 1851, and it goes through this whole thing. And then it will have suggested readings off to the right-hand side. And this is my first caveat. Do not trust everything you see. And furthermore, many of these suggestions will have nothing to do with the person you're looking for. You're going to have to use other parameters to figure that out. So for instance, US Army Transport Service passenger list 1910 to 1939. Well, I know Joe Friday did not live till 1939. He died around the turn of the last century. So I can just automatically discount all those things. But that's a kind of gut intuition that you have to do and are able to go through it. On the upper left-hand side, if there's a document this is taken from, they will often give you a graphic, an image of that, so you can read it for yourself. Sometimes that's really important because clearly these are transcribed data from a handwritten census thing, and often it's wrong. So just be aware that again, you need to use your critical faculties in order to doubt everything. Okay, so here's another thing where I did all collections. These were two different searches in time, and I came up with two different results, oddly enough. But here's the same one for the 1880 federal census, and then the General Land Office records. Well, Joseph Friday actually did have a homestead on San Juan Island, and these records are about that. But the thing that I really like you to look at is the left-hand side, and you go filter down by and go all the way to the bottom to family trees. And the reason I'm suggesting that, and I owe this a lot to Robin Jacobson saying, have you ever just checked to see if somebody's done a family tree on your person you're researching? And if you click on that, all of a sudden, you know, hopefully you'll come up with somebody who's actually done all the research for you. You don't have to go back to square one and figure it all out. They've done it for you. But again, I want that, enter that caveat again, and that is that what they put together may not be true. So be careful. What you're offered in terms of these two trees is a public tree. So on the first one here, Joseph Friday in the Pacific Northwest Hawaiians working tree only, and that's a public tree. So if I click on this, I will come up with that tree. The other one is a private tree, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't have access to it, but you need to ask permission, and they will tell you how to do that through Ancestry. So if you click on that one, they will give the name of the person to contact, and you can send them an email through Ancestry.com and say, I'm doing research on so-and-so, would you please allow me access to your tree? And most often people will do that. So it's really great. But we're going to look at this first public tree there and look at Joe Friday again. And sure enough, somebody's done all this research for it. And it's great, except for right off the bat, I happen to know that Joseph Friday was not born on San Juan Island. And secondly, it has as his mother, Mary Saptinar, which was his stepmother and the mother of his half-siblings, Mary and Lizelle. So again, please take this with a grain of salt. I cross-check all the time, and just be certain that you will, you know what you're looking for, and you know that you have the right person. Well, I'm going to do a big shout out to Robin Jacobson. She has this wonderful San Juan Islands family tree. I found many local families on this one. And I have found a few mistakes, and Robin is wonderfully generous in terms of correcting them and also offering more information. So that's a big shout out to her. This is a great resource. Okay, another way you can do this on the internet is by finding their grave. And I'm sorry to reference to Robin so much, but she always would say, you know, the only person who knows whether the information on the gravestone is correct is the person who's dead and in there. And they may not have given the right information. So again, be very cautious about this. This was a distant cousin of mine who lived in Hawaii. She was the first registered professional landscape architect in the state of Hawaii. She did some great stuff, and sure enough, I found her grave. So, and I was able to use some of those dates to corroborate her life story. So it was a great way to do it. Best way of doing it is to do find a grave. If you type in a name or do a location, you can do that. Billion Graves is also another way to do it, internment.net. Now, GenWeb has, if you go to Washington and then San Juan County, it actually lists all the cemeteries that it is aware of in San Juan County. And often there are online listings of the people buried in those cemeteries. So that's another resource you can go to. And there it is, Gen Web. So if you go to just Google Washington genealogy or WA Gen Web, and then you click on San Juan County there, you will come up with all these resources for San Juan County. Another really important resource in terms of local history are the various rural heritage sites. So there are now 4 of them in San Juan County. There's San Juan Island, Lopez Island, Orcas Island, and then Paydos Lighthouse one. So these are great sources of information. They range all the way from a picture of Jim Crook's dentures, oh boy, and but then Emma Lawson's marriage certificate, or all sorts of things. One of them was a actual fare schedule, a rate schedule for the ferries back in the 20s. So and boy, let me tell you, that was cheap back then. So there's a lot of information you can get that way. Again, you can get to San Juan Island Heritage off of, if you click on genealogy and online resources and then click on San Juan Island Heritage, that will take you to that site. The other libraries have similar connections directly to their Orcas Island Heritage and Lopez Island Heritage. Okay, I'm gonna take you to a kind of side version I do often in terms of researching local history, and that is the online document search for under the San Juan County recorded documents. And again, links to a lot of these sites are on this handout that I can email to you. But if you basically go to the San Juan County site, go under the assessor, and then, go under the, the assessor office, I believe. And then it's under recorded document search. So the best way to do it is to go to this form itself, click on fill in the last name and the first name. If you only know the first letter of the first name, I suggest you do that. And so for instance, I put in Friday and then Joseph, and I came up with these search results. Now, the first one is, excuse me, obviously what must have been some sort of transfer between Joe Friday and his half siblings, so Emma, Lizelle, and John. The other one is his actual patent for his homestead application to the United States. And this was actually, it's located kind of across the road from Animal Inn on San Juan Island. For those of you who are familiar with that, it's kind of in that dog leg where Boyce Road meets Wold Road. And so that's, the location is Township 35 North, Range 3 West, Section 17, and then it gives specific things. If you go to click on this 1956 and the document number, you will come to a description of the various people involved in this. But if you actually go to click on the thing to the right of that image, it will show you an image of the actual document. And I highly recommend that you do that, because it often contains information that is not contained either in this summary or the summary you will get if you click on the document number. The other odd thing about this is that you'll see it's 1956. Well, he did not get the patent in 1956. I believe he got it in the 1890s, but this is the date of recording. You'll see that 1/18/1956 at noon. And so it doesn't relate to when that document was actually done. Okay, another way of getting at documents is through the Washington Secretary of State. If you go under Legacy and then Genealogy, it will give you this main page on genealogical resources available through the Washington State government. And I go in particular to the Washington State Digital Archives. And again, you can just, I'll give you the link for that if you need it, but you can just Google Washington State Digital Archives and you'll come up with this page. And so you can search by collection off to the right or by keyword. But I often just search by first name and last name and then say all collections the way I do with Ancestry.com. So we fill in Joseph Friday, and lo and behold, we come up with this. Now, it has several collections where the name Joseph Friday is showing up. The birth records, cemetery records, death records, and marriage records. And let me tell you, I checked each one of those and it was not the Joe Friday I was looking for. But under the naturalization records, there were 5 records. I clicked on that, show all records, and I came up with this bottom part, Joseph Friday, naturalized in Jefferson County. And if you click on one of these lines, you will come up with his actual date of naturalization, which I believe was 1873, when the boundary dispute was settled. And in fact, what's interesting is that all 5 of these records are basically the same record. So it's somewhat redundant. Nevertheless, it's great information and you can add that into your research. You can also go to the Washington State Library Digital Collections, and you'll see this one page that talks about historical newspaper in Washington. That's a little bit, that's ungrammatical, isn't that? Anyway, if you click on that, you come up with historic newspapers, which is the way it ought to say it. And so you can either select a newspaper or you can just, do it for search all newspapers. Now, you can do proper names for this. I tried Joseph Friday, he didn't appear at all. But when I was doing research on my Lyme book, I just did Lyme and I came up with a lot of hits and some really great hits. So some of these are from newspapers in the South Puget Sound area, particularly early newspapers from Olympia, although there was a lot of coverage for the San Juan Islands in terms of Anacortes and Bellingham, things like that. So don't give up in terms of actual newspaper sources. I would just do a general search and then try to figure it out from there. There are there's another source of getting historic newspapers online. As far as I know, before the Friday Harbor Journal, which started in 1914 and is not available online, there were 3 newspapers. One was the San Juan Graphic. I've only seen 2 issues of that. One of them was really in tatters and was used as wallpaper in a building. And so that's not a great source until somebody finds some treasure trove out there. But there are 2 main ones that can be located in the Library of Congress if you Google Chronicling America, and then you go to select newspapers. If you want to do an earlier period, you do The Islander. So just look under ISL. So it's in alphabetical order under I. The Islander, and the Islander published from 1891 to 1898. The next newspaper is the San Juan Islander, and that was 1898 to 1914 until the start of the Friday Harbor Journal. So with these searches, you can do kind of what they call Boolean searches. So you can do any of the words with all the words with the phrase. So for instance, reef netting or Joseph Friday. And if that's too restrictive for you, I'd go down to the bottom and I'd say, you know, I'd put your words in there and then specify you can do either within 5 words of each other, 10 words of each other, 50 words of each other. So that's another way of kind of picking up key words, but it doesn't necessarily recognize the exact phrase that you give. These are great resources. And when you click on this, I don't have a slide for this, I apologize, but when you click on this, searching something, you will come up with a bunch of answers, all the way from, you know, one newspaper reference to a gazillion. And there is a sort function where I usually go in and sort that right away by date. So it will show me the earliest date of the mention of my search and then all the way to the latest date. And it's just a way of organizing that I find really helpful that way. Another source, and some of you may be familiar with this, and unfortunately this is a subscription. So if you get an account to, for instance, to Ancestry.com, if you have a paid account, you can get newspapers for not too much more. I'm thinking $89, something like that. So you have to pay for this. This is not available free online, but it does have a search function. And again, you go to home, but then you can do search itself. And here you can see from my account several of the recent searches that I've done. So under enter your search, I would do something like sturgeon. I was really interested in, were there any sturgeon in San Juan County? And then I click on advanced and I would put in this place name. So San Juan County, Washington, or Bellingham, or something like that. You can see that, okay, take this one, Catherine Delaney in Friday Harbor. So, you know, you can make a lot of mistakes and they'll still kind of pick up on it, and it's okay. So that's one way to do it. Another great source of information is History Link. So this is an online encyclopedia of history in Washington State. And so you can see from this, I think I Googled San Juan Islands or San Juan County, and I came up with Lynn Weber's Chinese Workers in the San Juan Islands, Russell Barsh's Coast Salish Camas Cultivation, and Friday Harbor Thumbnail History, Friday Harbor Waterfront, which I did, you know, and so on and so forth. These are great articles. And again, you know, somebody may have done all the research already for you. So don't, you know, don't hesitate to see if they have. Okay, I'm gonna take you through, and some of you may have heard this already, and for those of you who have, I apologize, but I'm gonna take you through my research for a person who homesteaded a property right near Zilster Lake in San Juan Valley on San Juan Island. And the reason I found out about her was that I had this homestead map, and you'll see kind of in the somewhat lower portion of it, lower left portion, a C emerling, and then FC, that's file case 1600. So I wanted to find out about, I had already done Jacques C. Archambault and Henry Quinlan, and I wanted to do this person. So I went to the BLM, Bureau of Land Management. That's not Black Lives Matter now. Bureau of Land Management, General Land Office, GLO, and it's a search thing. And I search for Emmerling, and then it turned out to be Catherine. And so I went to the state and the county, and then I gave her last name and her first name, or I could do first initial. And I came up with her homestead record, which I then sent away for what are called the proving up papers. Now, those cost money. They come from the National Archives. Somebody has to scan them for you. They cost $50 a pop, but they're full of a whole bunch of information. I'll go over a little of that in a while. But while I was waiting for that, I went into Ancestry.com and I came up with Catherine Emmerling. And so at that point, in the 1870 census, she was actually living in Whatcom County, and she was 18 years old, and she was living with Joseph Emmerling, who was 40 years old. And they, so I actually asked a friend to go into the Northwest Records, Northwest Archives Record Center in Bellingham, and they actually came up with a couple with Joseph Emmerling's dying and leaving his property to Catherine. So I mentioned before that I had written away to the archives for the proving up papers for Catherine Emmerling. And one of the statements here said that Catherine Vermouth, being duly sworn on oath, says that she is the identical Catherine Emmerling who made homestead entry number blah, blah, blah. So now I know that I have to look for both Catherine Emmerling and Catherine Vermouth, because she had married, you see down at the bottom here, John Vermouth. So I go back to the San Juan County recorded documents and I put in last name Vermouth, first name Catherine, and I come up with all these. Now, I want to start at the bottom and kind of work up. But so we see John and Catherine Vermouth, and we have a John Smeeney. Okay, well, that one above that is actually correct. Joseph Smeeney. It's actually Joseph Sweeney. And Joseph Sweeney was a merchant here in town who acted as kind of a real estate broker. So he would often lend people money in order to homestead their place and actually get the official occupancy that way. So obviously there were two kind of mortgages going on that way. And then eventually in 1884, Catherine Vermouth gets her title, her land title for her homestead thing. And lo and behold, within 2 years, she flips it to Joseph Sweeney. She sells it to it. And then in 4 years after that, she's buying stuff from Joseph Bull and Mary Bull. So I look up Joseph Bull, and it turns out that he's in Crow Valley on Orcas Island. And among his family documents here are these wonderful photos. So there he is, Joe Bull, dressed up to the nines for this photo. And here is good buds. So one of them is a freshette. One of them is, let's see, a LaPlante, and I can't remember who he is. But these are all, clearly buddies, but also neighbors. And so this starts to get you into the family connections of these local families and the way to kind of trace them, because a lot of these guys are actually interrelated. So I now go back to further along the San Juan County recorded documents for Catherine Vermouth, and I find out that in 1891, so this is a year after she's bought the property from Joseph and Mary Bull, she's selling it to an A.S. McDonald. And then all of a sudden in 1919, she's listed along with A.S. McDonald and Peter Frechette and things like that. All of a sudden she's appearing here. So she's Catherine Vermouth with John Vermouth here. She's Catherine Vermouth down here. And then there's this Catherine Staff. So I go into these documents, you know, what's going on here? And what it turns out is that I think John signed the deed down here when it was sold to A.S. McDonald. And so they had to find these witnesses to make sure that she, in fact, was also selling part of her property along with John to A.S. McDonald, and that this was a certified, you know, sale. But there's this odd thing going on with Catherine's staff here. So now I go over to the Washington State Digital Archives. Remember, you could search by name there. So I search for Catherine Vermouth, because I know that's what her name was back then. And lo and behold, I come up with a marriage certificate to a Martin Carlson in 1901. So this is 10 years after she sold the property, but it's before she's doing that correction to the recorded documents. So then I look under Carlson, and here it gets tricky in that it's Kate Carlson, so Catherine, Kate. So if it doesn't always happen that you know, you have the right name, try other variations that way. And lo and behold, she's marrying Alfred Staff. So she becomes Catherine Staff. And that's what's appearing on recorded documents back there. So now I go back into Ancestry.com and I look up Catherine Staff, and I hit this real treasure trove. And it's this archive by Charles Roblin. And Charles Roblin in the 19-teens went around the state of Washington trying to enroll Native Americans who were not enrolled in order to get them land. So if they were not a member of a tribe, that a treaty signing tribe or something that they had, you know, had access to land, they could get a government allotment if they enrolled as kind of a part of a tribe. And Charles Roblin took these wonderful notes. They're incredible. And you can see this on the right-hand side. So she has Catherine Staff. She interviewed her at Port Ludlow. She goes into her father. She goes into when her father came to San Juan Island. Interesting here, she says in this third thing, it says married twice, first to Martin Carlson, white, 5 children, all now dead, unfortunately, and then married second time to Alfred Staff. Well, we happen to know already that in fact she was married 2 other times, right? One with Emmerling back in Whatcom County, and then the second time with John Vermouth. So we're kind of filling in a little bit more. This is what she obviously wanted to tell Charles Roblin, but you know, it's not the full picture. So we know a little bit more about that. So this yields an incredible amount of information for me at this point. So I get to the point where I know who her parents were. I know when she was born in 1853. I know that her father was John Bull. He was born in the Sandwich Islands in Hawaii, man after my own heart. He signed up with Hudson Bay Company. He worked at Fort Nisqually and then on San Juan at Bellevue Sheep Farm. And he died around 1860. That's something I've never been able to nail down. His wife and Catherine's mother was Fuwewat Mary Squallop, and she was half Lummi and half Clallam. And after John Bull's death, she marries John Kahana, who's another Kanaka. Excuse me. So here's a picture from the Center for Pacific Northwest Studies of John Kahana, her second husband, and Mary Squallop and Robert Bull. So one of her children from the first marriage. Okay, so Catherine Bull has several siblings here. And I'm not going to go through all the names for her mother, but in her first marriage with John Bull, there were the siblings Charles, Jean Auguste, Joseph, or Joe, who we've already seen. So lo and behold, it was Joe, Catherine's brother, who was selling her that property on Orcas, and then Sophia, or Sophie. After John's death, she remarries John Kahana, and this is a real problem with Hawaiian names in Ancestry or any other record. They're all over the place, so he's known as John Hallam Kahano or Alam Keone. Wow, it's all over the place. And look at their kids' names. William Bull, well, that's pretty straightforward, but Charles Kahana, Keonatum Alam Kahano, and Gregory Kahano. So these spellings are very very inventive, if you will. So eventually, here's what I come up with. I come up with Catherine Bull Emerling Vermouth Carlson Staff. Born in 1853, she dies in 1932, I believe in Port Ludlow. She's born to John Bull and Mary Squallop. She's married, we think, to Joseph Emerling in that 1870 census. She homesteads in the valley around 1873, gets her patent in 1883. She marries John Vermouth in the meantime while they're homesteading. And then in 1890, she buys property from her brother and his wife. And then she marries Martin Carlson, and then she marries Alfred Staff after Martin Carlson dies. And then she actually outlives Alfred Staff too and dies in 1932 in Port Ludlow. So this is all stuff I have pieced together, and I've kind of taken you through the steps of how I did that. Then after having done all this, I look at the family trees, and somebody's done a family tree. Now, maybe this is, I mean, I think this happens all the time, right? But I do want to say that this family tree doesn't fit entirely with what I came up with. I came up with a lot more in terms of both spouses. Remember John Vermouth, remember Joseph Emerling, and I also came up with more information that way. So I don't feel bad about having found this after all, but it is kind of a long trek. So I kind of want to end by just giving some warnings about doing research, particularly over the internet. First off, I think this is true of all historical research. You need at least 2 references to really be certain of something. There's a lot of misinformation out there. You will find, particularly in Ancestry.com, that people repeat that misinformation because they're taking it, it's not wrong of them. They're taking it from somebody else who did that research. And so, that I think that's fine that way. Name spellings and nicknames. Oh boy, you can see from all those names that Catherine had, Kate, Catherine, the misspellings of her last name, Emerling, with 2 R's, and and then all those other things. And then particularly when you get into groups where the census takers are not familiar with that cultural group. So that happens with Coast Salish names a whole bunch, and it happens with Sandwich Islanders or Hawaiian names a whole bunch. And that's really just keep that in mind and keep that flexibility in mind. Always do the women's surnames with their birth name, basically. It's, as we can see with Catherine Bull, I've tried to keep with Bull because, you know, they can obviously get married 4 times and outlive all their husbands and still, you know, still hopefully it can be linked to that original birth name. The Ellis Island and the renaming fallacy. So when you have ancestors who are immigrants, and many people will say, well, they came to Ellis Island and they had a different name in the old world and they got reassigned a new name at Ellis Island. That is not true. The actual people, the immigration personnel at Ellis Island knew an average of 2.5 languages other than English. They knew the languages fairly well, but what they were working off of were the ship's manifests. So this renaming thing probably occurred in Liverpool or The Hague or some other place where the ship came from, and it was the ship's list of passengers that actually changed it. So just be careful about, again, what happens when somebody crosses the Atlantic and what happens to their name. Final thing I want to say about local history is that the San Juan Islands have been called all sorts of things and belong to all sorts of jurisdictions. So, of course, prior to 1872, they were the disputed islands, and they're actually in the 1870 census, that's US Census, that's what they're called, the disputed islands. And so it was not clear whether they were English or American territory. And so just keep that in mind. When, and then they, if they were American territory, then they would be under Oregon territory until 1853, in which case they would be under Washington territory. But then they would be in a series of different counties, depending on the configuration at the time. So originally they were in Whatcom County, then they were in Jefferson County. If you remember, when Joseph Friday got his naturalization, so when he became a United States citizen, he did it in Jefferson County. We were also part of Island County for a while. So it's all very confusing until we become our own county in 1873. And even then it's not really clear. And then Washington, of course, becomes a state, not a territory, in 1889. So just keep that in mind when you're dealing with government records, that the records may be under a different jurisdiction. So let's see. I'm just going to go to one other thing. And this is what I can send you all if you're interested at all. These are the actual links to a lot of the information I've just given you. So the first 3 are the heritage resources. The 4th one is where to get to San Juan County recorded documents. Then if you're looking for newspaper archives, that's where you get it. I didn't mention this at all, but there are a number of maps of the early islands that are available. And then you can go to various state and federal resources, including the Washington State Digital Archives, the Northwest Regional Branch of the State Archives, History Link, Heritage Quest, BLM, GLO things in the National Archives in Seattle. And of course, what I've totally left off here is Ancestry.com, which you can get through the San Juan Island Library website under genealogy. So I think that's it. I'm going to stop the share, and I'm going to open it up for questions or corrections. How about that? Anybody have any questions? You can literally raise your hand or virtually raise your hand. Oh, come on. I didn't. Okay, Karen.
Oh, so I just sent you a question. Did you go into Canada at all?
I have gone into Canada, and it's a great thing about Ancestry.com. It often overlaps with Canada and will give you records. So, in fact, they're quite, in modern times, they even give border crossings. So you can find out if you have a relative who was maybe smuggling or just going back and forth a lot because of relatives and things like that. They will give actual recorded border crossings. So it's a really great resource that way.
So for First Nation tribal members,
yeah,
that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, that's a real hard one, Karen, and I don't have a real good answer for that. I think that I would go to the Roblin records because when he does it thoroughly, and it's really, really good. And it does overlap into Canada when he's recording it. But you know, it's often hit or miss.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Luann, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was wondering, when you're doing your research, have you found a good note-taking technique or form? I find, like, when I'm starting to do something and I'm like on Ancestry and I'm finding all this information, I'm like writing notes in a spiral notebook and up and down inside the page, and I don't really have a good format for keeping track of the information that I'm finding. Do you have anything to recommend on that?
No, and I do know that, you know, so for instance, because I subscribe to Ancestry.com, I can make my own family tree. So I've started several family trees. They look very similar to the ones I gave you examples of, and I cite all the documents so you can find out where I actually found that information. And so that's good that way. But you know, the person who I really recommend this way, because she's just such a better note taker than I am, is Lynn Weber Rochefort, because she has this system, and it's actually, Robin, it's a program, isn't it? That she actually uses to record her notes, and they're interlinked. So she will actually, and correct me if I'm wrong, Robin, she will actually give the quote of, you know, her source, then she will get where the source came from, and then she's able to link it to her various research accounts. So she can, it's a great way of card filing, except doing it virtually, and it's far more flexible than my scrawl.
Lynn teaches has taught a class on Evernote at our library, and I took her class. It will change your life. There's a free version of it, or you can have a subscription version of it. It depends on how many devices you want to have connected to your Evernote account, but it's wonderful. It will stop you from writing on cocktail napkins. Well, maybe not, but at least you'll be more organized, because you're going to be, you can enter it on your phone, you can enter it on your computer, anywhere, and it will consolidate everything and keep it for you.
And what was that called?
That I could recommend about tracking as you're researching is print out from any of these free websites these forms, like Boyd was referring to a form. There's one called a timeline. And once you start to establish, you know, birth and marriage and relocation, that type of thing, and that will keep you from getting lost in this person's life. The other thing that is really a key to it is a research log, so that you don't do the same
Yeah.
search again. You know, these are all things that we learn because we did them wrong. Yeah, and you get really excited because you found something, and if you eventually find in your files that you found that same thing 2 years ago and had completely forgotten about it. So a research log will keep you from making that mistake.
So, and Luann, the program is Evernote, Evernote, Evernote.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So James, Francis, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, last year I was working with, I got a subscription to Ancestry.com, and it only carried me back through my grandparents, and then it pretty much ended there, and I had that information already anyway.
Uh-huh.
So they were from Missouri, and that's another part of my question. Since I know their names and pretty much not so much birth dates, but years and approximately when they died in Missouri, in the area outside Kansas City, how do I do a search, a genealogy search in another state like that?
So I would, again, I'm talking Ancestry here, and I don't, you know, each state has different specific records that you can tap into, like I was talking with Washington State. But what I would do in your case is I would go to Ancestry.com. I would find out that town in Missouri that you're talking about. I would.
You sound like you're from Missouri. Only Missourians say Missouri. Now go on, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I would, so I would give as many of those parameters as possible and then start looking for their parents. That's what I'd start doing.
But I did that, and
Yeah.
it just kind of stopped cold.
Yeah.
I was totally disappointed in in what they were giving me, the information I was getting.
Yeah.
I was not plussed at all.
Yeah. I don't have
I'm
a
trying to go back. They were immigrants, but way back, like in the 1700s, to the
Right.
East Coast, from
Right.
UK, Scotland, Ireland, and I'm trying to get back as far as that because we travel, and I'd like to go back far enough to where I could find relatives, distant relatives, of course, in the UK and Ireland and
Right.
Scotland. That's the whole idea behind this for me.
Yeah.
So,
I'll
but
give you a
is there
similar-
any way that I can go back that far in the US to the 1700s and then find immigrant information as to where they came from in the UK?
Well, the simple answer is yes, you can, if you can get those links. But Robin, do you have any suggestions this way? I don't,
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
you're fortunate because your ancestors that you're looking for came to the US early, which means that they are going to be in all of those censuses between when they arrived and when there was a federal census. Many of the states did state censuses. Washington State is one, for instance. So they are there. I wonder if you are looking only in family trees. You know, you've got to start looking in the census returns. And then there's a separate category for death records and marriage and all of that.
So how do I get past my grandparents
You have,
to
yeah,
their
you have to
parents and
look.
their parents?
You have to look in the documents section. You're looking for official government documents that will have a story of your ancestors. You don't want the family
in
trees.
Missouri? in Missouri?
Yes, Missouri has great records actually that are online. Did you purchase a US subscription or a world subscription?
I don't know.
Okay, so you can get most of what you need off of the US subscription, which is about half as much money as the world subscription. You can entertain yourself for a number of years actually because of how early your ancestors came. Now, another really great resource for you, and it's completely free, is the LDS church sponsored website called familysearch.org. I love that site, familysearch.org. And they've always been good. It's always been a great website. In the last couple of years, it has really, it's on steroids. It has boosted with what is available there. And as an example, when I was recently researching for the San Juan Historical Museum, what happened in the 1918 influenza pandemic on San Juan Island for our monthly history column, I noticed that the obituaries for people who died during that period of time did not mention that they had died of anything in particular. It was just like a sudden illness or a long illness. So I wanted to see the death records. And so I went to the Washington State death records that Boyd talked about. And yes, they had an abstract of the death record, but I want to see the digitized, oftentimes handwritten record. And so it said image not available. But guess what? Familysearch.org has those images that our state says are not available. And it was a gold mine of information. So familysearch.org is international. And so they will have information from Missouri. They're going to have it from all the different states. And oftentimes, if you cannot find something on Ancestry, you will find it on familysearch.org. You'll be very happy when you can find what they've got. But you've got to get out of the family tree sections. If somebody has posted a family tree that is, we call them unsourced, or if they just have one or two sources, do not spend time on it because that person has just copied information from somewhere else. It may be accurate, it may be incomplete, or it may be completely bogus. And so I look at how many sources a person has attached to a tree to give it credibility. You know, it's just like when you're reading the history of something. If it's not documented, if it's not annotated, then it's folklore and it may turn out to be true, but do not trust it. Like Boyd says, there's just a lot of stuff you can't trust. Use it as a clue, write it down, but don't count on it completely. But my recommendation for you is look at familysearch.org as well as Ancestry.
Well, this is another thought that just occurred to me. What do you think of, since I'm trying to find, you know, blood relations in the UK, about what would you think about the DNA aspect, you know, where you do a DNA search?
Uh-huh.
Do you know anything about that?
I do. I know a fair amount about that. DNA is done in different versions of the test. Most people are doing autosomal, which is what Ancestry sells, ancestry.com. Autosomal is going to take both of your parents' lineage and combine it into you. You may know which one belongs to your dad, which one belongs to your mom. The more expensive tests will be able to separate between mother's line and father's line. The paternal line is called the Y DNA. Mother's line is called mitochondrial. Both of those go back further, but the autosomal test, which like 90% of us are doing, only is accurate to about 5 generations back. And we count as 1 generation. So it's only 4 generations back from us that you can look at those results with any accuracy. It literally drops like off a cliff. The accuracy goes down that fast after about.
Well, I want to go back like 15 generations, so.
It won't show. It won't show. And then do you remember that because how random inheritance works? You know, we learned this stuff in high school, but we didn't pay attention. I certainly didn't pay attention in high school when we were learning about random inheritance, but it means that we randomly inherit from each of our parents, which is why if we have siblings, we don't look just like our sisters. You know, you can have two brothers who don't look anything alike and they have the exact same parents, and it's because of random inheritance. You know, one will be tall, one will be short, one will be blonde. So you can't just always go by that. It's very possible to have, let's just say, Native American heritage, and it will not show in your DNA. It doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It's just not showing because of random inheritance.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Thank you for that.
yeah,
You're welcome.
I'm gonna move on to, I'm sorry, it's Derek, but you told me what your name was and I forgot, sorry.
It's Rita.
Rita, thank you.
Yeah, a couple of comments for James, because I'm just ramping up with this stuff recently. If you're looking at family trees on Ancestry.com, sometimes there's this little tiny discrete arrow above like your great-grandfather or your great-grandmother. If you click on that, it expands it more. And so you can see further generations. So it may be that, you know, there's so much stuff on the screen, you may not notice that's there. Recently, I just discovered I'm on Facebook, and Facebook, if you go searching, has groups, friend groups, based on individual state genealogy. So I just recently signed Minnesota and Iowa. And if you watch through that, then you might see people who are affiliated with other kinds of local genealogy groups, historical societies, or whatever that you might be able to contact to find information specifically about Missouri. So you can see if there's a Missouri one. And then
Okay.
don't forget Cindy's List, because Cindy's List has a gazillion stuff in it, and that might be able to point you to some Missouri specific things. My comment was, and I can't remember now what you were showing on the screen, but it was something that you had gone to the primary source and found this document. Do you tend to save those documents to your computer and then upload them as source documents to your family tree that you're doing on Ancestry?
Yeah, and I find Ancestry is great that way. You do have the ability, if you go into a family tree and they've included all those photos and those various documents, I often copy them, you know, to my own computer. You probably know it used to be with Ancestry, when you did a family tree, you could actually download that family tree. You can't do that anymore. So yeah. I've always just been very careful to, whenever I latch onto something, I save it. And I've gotten to the point where, for instance, whenever I find a page in the like the San Juan County Census of 1880, I'll actually go through and save every page I can of that census, just in order to have it at my fingertips. Yeah, I have a lot of written files and you know, physical files, but I just find that the more you save that way, because I have been frustrated and not been able to get back to something I know was there. So I don't know if that, do you do the same thing or?
Well, I pretty much been internet version person of doing Ancestry. I haven't really gone back to doing searching in original or primary sources and then copying that information down. But I did notice when newspapers.com had a sale on over Memorial Day or whenever it was, that there were some things there that I copied down because I wasn't sure how they would copy over into Ancestry, or, you know, or that there might be other clues in there that I wanted to go back to. But I'm new to all this, and I haven't been doing very much in terms of saving paper trail copies of things yet.
Well, I'll tell you one instance. So for instance, in the San Juan County recorded documents, I was doing research on my farm book, and I was doing the field guides which involved barns. You know, I was really into barns. And so there was this one sale of this one farm. And when I actually clicked on the image of it, the deed included this whole list of machinery and all this livestock that was sold along with the farm. And you'd have no idea if you thought it was just a land sale, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
It was very, very detailed. And so that's why I tend to try to go to that original source, first of all, because in order to A, correct errors, I found a lot of errors, and B, to really see if there's more there than meets the eye, literally. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions? Or, wow, you all have been very patient.
That was fun.
Okay, I'm not hearing any. So thank you all for doing this. I would love feedback. If you want to, like I said, if you want to get that document with all those links, I'm happy to send it to you. Just send me an email that you got the invitation at my email address you got the invitation from, and I'll send it out to you. So great. Thank you all for doing this.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Boyd.
Thank you, Boyd.
Thanks, Boyd.
Thanks, Boyd. It was great.